There is a man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. He is German, and some people have suggested that he was gay. I don't really know. Maybe he was. If he was really a tortured soul, because you're talking about a man being born at a time where such things are just not permitted and accepted. Nietzsche was an introvert, which means that anything that goes inside him, he feels. And he feels them deeply. There are a couple of tragedies in his life. Number one, he runs into this young woman, asks her on a date. She says yes. On the second night, he proposes marriage. She says no. And he becomes really, really sad and depressed. Time passes. He runs into another young woman, asks her out on a date. He proposes marriage. She says no. And both of these young women go away marrying his friends. Tragically, for someone like Nietzsche or someone like some of you in this class, you may wake up one morning in your bed and you say to yourself, today I want to do something that's meaningful. Maybe I want to go to church and pray. Maybe I want to call my friends and have a meaningful conversation. Maybe I want to go out and just date and have a meaningful date. And every door you knock on and every door that opens, you realize, yes, you can do all those things, but there is no meaning that can be found. Something about you is restless. You keep praying to something, to life, to bring down some meaning into your life, but nothing can be found. And Nietzsche becomes really, really, really angry at people and really, really angry at the culture. As I mentioned to you last night, I have no idea who you guys are, but imagine that you get to be 5 or 6 years of age and you've had a really, really difficult time. Your father has been an addict, your mom has never been around, and you had to take care of yourself for most of your short life, which is only 5 years. And one night while you're in a fetal position and you're just crying and screaming, you say, why was I born if there is no one who's willing to take care of me? Why am I here? This is too much. Now, what is lucky for Nietzsche is that he has the eloquence of speech, and he has the eloquence and the craftiness and the creativity to write. And he writes really, really well. And he writes all these nasty things about what it means to be human and what it means to live in society that demeans us, corrupts us, contaminate us. Nietzsche is like this kid who wakes up and screams for God, but God can't be found. Screams for meaning, but meaning can be found. Screams for purpose, but purpose can't be found. So you know what he does? He does what you and I do. He journals. So in one of his books, which I think is called Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and there's a story in it, it's called The Madman. Now, because Nietzsche was very fond of the Greek culture, Greek narratives or mythologies, no doubt he borrowed the story from the story of Diogenes. Diogenes is this dark, gloomy philosopher, some 2,000 years ago. He wakes up at 6 in the morning, walks to Lakeshore around 9 or 10 in the morning with a flashlight or a lantern or a lit candle. Now think for a moment. The sun is out, there are no clouds. Everybody's walking, everybody's laughing. Diogenes is not blind. He can see things. And yet he has a lit lantern. And people ask him, well, you know, the sun is out, there is light outside, you can turn off your lantern. He says, no, I am here to look for a just human being. A human being who understands. A human being who knows how to live, how to think, how to speak. Because if you really, really want to know what comedy is people who speak without knowing and understanding anything. Sit back, listen to them, and you will realize they just ramble on and on and on and on. And what could be funnier than that? I have no doubt some of you in this class have encountered, you know, your nieces and nephews, these like 10, 18, 20-year-old punks, and you happen to be like a few years older than they are, you've been around the block a few times, and they look at you and say, well, let me tell you what love is. and you try to reason with them, I've been in love like 5 times. Maybe I should tell you. No, you don't really understand. Let me tell it to you. And then they open their mouth. And you don't know if you should slap them, you should vomit, you should run away, what you should do. So here's a madman in Nietzsche's story. He's running around with a lit lantern. And all of a sudden, people begin to circle him. What are you doing here? Why are you screaming? What are you looking for? Who have you lost? Why do you walk around with a lit lantern? What is wrong with you? I'm looking for God. Why would anyone look for God? You look for God because you're looking for your soul. You look for God because you look to belong to something that's greater than life. You're looking for God because you're looking for meaning, for purpose, for identity. That should you die, on the other side there is God waiting for you. You're looking for God because you want to know good from bad, right from wrong. You're looking for God because you want to know how to live. If there is a soul inside you, you want God to guide you towards that direction. Maybe your life is just filled with pain, and you're looking for God because you want to cry and scream, because you want God to hold you, to give you some comfort and solace. Next time you go on a dating app, why do you do so? You love your parents, it's just not enough. You love your siblings, it's not enough. You have money, it's not enough. You go on a dating app because deep down you are lonely. 8 billion people on this planet and you are lonely. You can just open your front door, walk around the lake, thousands of people coming and going, and yet you still feel lonely. That's Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who is born in a time where the culture can't give him anything. The only difference between someone like Nietzsche and myself is that when I go out there to look for meaning but can't find any, I get depressed. I stay in my room, lock the door, don't answer to my wife or my kids, and I don't have a talent to write, and I don't have the eloquence of speech. So I just sit in my room, and I'm in mourning. It seems as if my life has turned into a cemetery, and I am grieving the loss of something I don't know. As the madman begins to look at all the people around him and saying to them, I have lost God and I'm looking for God. Can someone please tell me where he is? He comes to realize something really interesting. هر کسی از ظن خود شد یار من و از درون من نجز اسرار من. There was a painter, Norwegian, by the name of Edward the Monk. He has, most of his paintings are really the same, but this particular one called The Scream. You're walking on this bridge. There are some people behind you, there are some people in front of you. You're the only one who's single, and you're the only one who's not smiling. In fact, your mouth is open, and in fact, you're screaming. Why does anyone scream? Because they're in pain. And what exactly is it that you and I want when we are in pain? You want to be held, you want to be listened to. So what you have in this painting is that this man screams, but people just laugh. No one cares. That's one of the things you need to understand about pain. And this is like one of those universal truths. It doesn't matter what age you're born into, what time in history. Whenever pain comes to you, and whenever you try to express your pain to another, you need to understand the person who's hearing you will never understand you. Understanding has to do with intellect. Pain lives inside your soul. What you want is you want to break bread emotionally, but your companion isn't there with you. Your companion is healthy. Your companion is good. His life is fine. You're the one who's broken. And this is what Nietzsche talks about. The man who's looking for a purpose screams for help, but no one can help him because no one feels the way he does. No one thinks the way he does. And that's one of the lessons that you and I need to learn. If life has broken you, find the proper tools to keep the brokenness inside you. Play music with it, dance with it, cry with it, run with it, go to the ring and box with it. It matters very little what you want to do. Try not to share your pain with another because they won't understand you. Eventually it'll turn into gossip and then you feel betrayed. A few weeks ago, there was a group of people who showed this movie about the events that are taking place in Palestine. So my wife and I went and watch this movie for a couple of hours. It was a documentary. And so the guy who was running the show said, well, when the movie's over, let's have a round table. We'll all sit together and we'll talk a little bit. So the movie's done, we're all sitting and everybody begins to say things. We're sitting in a circle, so person number one begins to talk and they ramble on for about 10 minutes. And person number two rambles on for 15 minutes. As I'm sitting back and listening and saying, well, none of these folks are Palestinians or Middle Easterners. I understand that sometimes you want to raise your fist or raise your voice and say a couple of things about racism or about injustice of this and injustice of that. But why would you want to do it? If your belly is full, if you have no concerns, it doesn't mean that what you witness doesn't create pain inside you. But I think the more mature response is just to keep your mouth shut out of respect for people who are actually suffering. So if you want to make sure that the pain that lives inside you is not defiled, try if you can to find the tools to keep the stuff within you. People will trash it. Eventually Nietzsche throws down this lantern, walks into a church and sings the mass for the dead. I have come far too early for these people. I'm going to go away. And I'm going to write. And in the 21st century, some poor chap will pick up this book from Barnes and Nobles, we'll take it home, we'll read a few chapters, and then we'll understand. That's 300 years after. And I say this story for one simple reason. You and I have come to an age where despite our desperate desire to find meaning, to find companionship, to find profundity, to find religion, to find soul, there's a good chance that you won't be able to find it. And just in case you run into a messiah, a teacher, someone who can help you, you're not ready for the help. You're ready to be excited. You're ready to be inspired, but you're not ready for transformation. And that person will eventually leave you with a message. In about 20 years, you will understand, but not yet. The next fellow who entered the human scene is named Karl Marx. Like most young people, he's a romantic. He likes hippie philosophy. Mother Teresa, for those of you in this class who have heard of that particular name, she used to be this German, tiny little woman at the age of 15, quite hot when she was young. As she got older, she became less hot, she became warm, and then quite unattractive later on. But at the age of 15, despite her privilege, she walks to India. And there is something about India she falls in love with. We don't know what it is. And she writes many, many letters to the Pope saying that, build me a house here. Let me live amongst the poor. Let me live amongst the needy. Let me help them. I don't want to come back to Germany. I don't want to come back to Rome. I want to stay here in India. Marx had a relatively fun life early on in life. He hung out with young Hegelians, all these dreamers, think that eventually life is going to take them to paradise. But you're talking about the 18th century, you're talking about the age of Terminators, the age of factories, the age of machines. I was 18. I had tons of friends. Then one day my parents called me and they say, Amir, my mom and I, your mom and I, and your sister, we've decided to come and stay in America and you guys can live with us and we'll buy a business. I said, really? Why would you guys want to do that? Stay home, stay in Iran, enjoy your families. No, you're our children, we miss you guys. My brother and I didn't want my parents to come here because we knew it's going to be tortured. We have to go back to school, responsibilities, obligations, yes and no's. Family demands. They come here. 6 months later, they buy a car wash. Every morning for the next 17 years, from 6 in the morning until 7 at night, he washed cars. Myself, my brother, my mom, and my dad. I hated the family business. I had no time for fun. I had no time for my friends. I had no time to read. I had no time to do anything. Then I got to be 45 and 50. Then I was able to go back in time and review my life. And I realized something really interesting. Working shoulder to shoulder with my parents made our relationship rock solid. I will do anything for them. Before the coming of factories, the big machines, you need to understand, you wake up, you go into the field, tens, if not hundreds of you. You talk to one another while you're plowing the ground. You eat lunch together. You take a nap together. You wake up together. You play with the land again. Then you go home. Nobody feels lonely. You take a shower. You take your family. You take them to town. And you meet people you've been working with all day long. No one's depressed. Everybody breaks bread physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Everybody feels connected. But factories are not going to be made in tiny little cities or villages. You bring one factory in a village, it turns into a town, then it turns into a city, then it turns into a country. It's huge. You and I live in Oakland. It's a zoo. How many friendships can you really create in a life that moves so fast? All of us in this class work. We are put in a cubicle. The only given what, a 30-minute lunch break? You know how human relationships are built, right? They're built on wasting a lot of time with another human being. You sit and you talk gibberish and you begin to be attached to the way they look, the way they smell, the way they talk. That's how you build friendships. And it happened organically for all of us. What happens in Marx's time is that these huge factories are built. And what exactly is it that you and I need? We need money. You need money to buy bread, to buy milk, to buy meat. But farms are dead. Villages are dead. You have to move to New York. No one has got time to stop and talk to you. Everybody's rushing. And what do you give to earn a buck? You give your life away. So this is what Marx began to observe. 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds leave their house at 4 in the morning. They stand by a conveyor belt for 10, 15, 16, 17 hours. They come home dead. How much do they get paid? Pennies. Those who work don't get rich. Those who own the factories get rich. Now what do you have for the first time? You have human beings. If you've watched the movie The Matrix, for those of you who are old enough, ultimately what Marx argued, very much like what Morpheus told Neo, is that human beings are reduced to a Duracell battery. You know, in the Middle East, when a teacher walks into a classroom, all the students stand. In India, in Middle East, in many parts of Africa, a teacher becomes symbolic for the house of wisdom. There are specific etiquettes that students need to follow. But that's not the way this place works. We use people. We exploit people. And that was the message of Karl Marx. No one is a human being anymore. All of us are a prostitute to a system that we can't see, that we can't touch, we can't change. We are used from the moment we are awake or born to the time that we die, and we have zero power to make any changes. Henry Ford, before he went into car business, he had this factory where toasters are made. There came a point he came to realize that he just made too many toasters. And Walmart and Costco refuse to carry anymore because they have tons. And a lot of people have just bought them. So he sits back and says, who doesn't have toasters? I have 1,000 people working for me. They don't have toasters. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to blitz them, advertise the benefits of having a toaster in-house. And just in case they say they don't have money, I'll create this system called loan. I'll loan them the money. And just in case they can't afford, I'll say, why don't you work an extra 5 hours? And Marx argued this beautiful thing about capitalism. There was a time where people could only use your body. But as Malcolm X would say, you're a field slave, not a house slave. A house slave imagines that capitalism is his friend. A house slave is willing to give his life for this system. A house slave has forgotten who he is. A house slave doesn't remember his history. A house slave doesn't remember the heritage. A house slave doesn't remember that the soul of God lives inside him. But the field slave, Malcolm X argued, that's a very, very, very different animal. He works for the company, but always remembers who he is. What capitalism did for us is the following. Not only does it occupy our physical life, it also occupies our emotional, our intellectual, and our spiritual life. There is no space you can walk into where capitalism does not exist. It's impossible. You don't fall in love. The system pushes you into loneliness and depression, and you seek another human being as your Messiah. But that's only temporary. Now, Marx, of course, was hopeful, imagining that eventually people will wake up, they will rise up, and they will demolish this capitalistic system. But Marx didn't really understand human nature too well. And Marx didn't really understand the cunningness of the system he was writing about. Let me just say one last thing about Karl Marx. He actually he collected a lot of money, and he did buy a lot of guns, and he did pass out those guns, because ultimately he came to realize that Jesus is wrong. If you keep turning the other cheek, your face will fall off. You have to rise up, and you have to fight the system that crushes you on a daily basis. His daughter, Jenny, died. Then his wife, Jenny, died. And then 2 months later, he died. But when his daughter died, and they had no medicine and they had no money, and he couldn't take her to the hospital, he said, "My daughter is a lamb of God. It's a sacrifice that I have made for my people. Capitalism is such a cruel beast, it has killed my daughter." Next is Sigmund Freud. Freud lived to see World War I. He lived to see part of the Nazi movement. Freud is one of those prophets of the 20th century that you can't easily dismiss. And even in this class, I've heard of Magnus Carlsen. He's a chess player. When he was 4, he began playing chess about 7-8 hours a day. He's like a Beethoven. Sigmund Freud, when he was maybe 5 or 6 or 7, his brother Michael was born. For those of you in this class who are firstborn and you have a sibling, if you pay close attention, you realize something really interesting. The firstborn, they get so much attention, they get so much love. Their parents burden them with so much hope, so many dreams. They're brand new parents, and your parents give you 110% of their attention. Once in a while, the parents look at this kid and they say, "Life is a long journey. Maybe we should give our kid a brother or a sister." And so they lock themselves in the bedroom, they have sex. A couple minutes later, a child comes out. Now the firstborn begins to cry. "Milk, bicycle, clothes, TV, can you wipe my butt?" But the parents don't respond because they're busy taking care of this other kid. And the firstborn, without really knowing, has this sense of resentment. For the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I scream and my parents run to me. Now, I scream for 10 hours. I feel abandoned. Where are my parents? Why do they love him more than me? So you know what Freud does? He sits and he prays. Not prays to save his soul, but prays so that God can be the cause of his brother's death, Michael. And lo and behold, his tiny little brother gets sick and dies. And that haunts him for the rest of his life, because he believes he and his prayer was the cause of his brother's death. And from the age of 7 or 8, kind of like Magnus Carlsen, he says, "You know what? I want to understand what makes human beings human beings. Why do they have all these emotions inside them? Why they're so angry? What is wrong with them? Why do they become addicted to things? Why they're so miserable? Why can't they overcome their misery?" Now, Karl Marx had believed that it's the powerful people who make our lives miserable. But that's not true. Karl is wrong. Some of you in this class have been in perfectly good and healthy relationships, but something about your organism tells you it's not enough. Your job is fine. You're making money, but something about you, it just says it's not enough. Greed. It's not about capitalism. Greed is part of what it means to be human. Lust. It's something that you and I are born with. We are divided animals unto ourselves. We don't need Trump to divide us. We are divided, period. For the past maybe 1800 years, religion had the power to tame the beast that lives inside us. But World War I told us what? There is no decency in human beings. People don't care. Cultures don't care. It's always about the American interest. I don't care who lives in Africa, but if what they're doing does not serve the American interest, we will demolish them. But what about justice? What about human rights? Fuck all of that. So Freud comes forth and says, look, there are two parts to us. A part that has zero patience, a part that is like a 2-year-old infant, screams and cries all the time, seeks pleasure, the cheapest, the cheesiest of kinds. This part will lie, will cheat, will deceive, will do all sorts of things to get what it wants. It knows no bounds. It seeks power, and it wants to exercise its power and dominance all the time. Have you guys seen what has happened to Palestine? Do you know what Palestine was and what it is? Racism is an act without reflection, because to think is to think about justice, think about fairness, think about equality. And this part that Freud talked about, he calls it the id. Doesn't want to think, doesn't want to reflect. If it wants something, it will do whatever it possibly can to get it, at any cost. There is this other part to us, which he calls the superego. It's this part that once in a while stands up and says, do you really need this? Do you really just want to go out with this person just to have sex with them and then toss them? Is that really what you want to do? Do you really need more money? Why don't you grow up a little bit? Now, one of the nice things about the superego is that it is the thing that creates shame in us, guilt in us. It's the way you and I repent. We weep after having made a transgression of sorts. The infantile part of us doesn't give a shit about anything. It's this other part of you where you know you've made wrongs, and you go to your companion and you say, listen, I was wrong, I am sorry. Now that is the superego part of you in place. Now, tragically, Freud had argued that the most dominant part of who and what we are really is this other part. The untamed, the ridiculous, the infantile, the childish. How is superego created? The moment you are born, this infantile part of you is born with you. We don't need training for that. But this other part of you that you need to be ashamed and you need to repent, now that requires training. If you are religious, there are moments you catch yourself. If you've had good parents, moments where you transgress the teachings and the wisdom of your parents come back to haunt you. If you have seen your parents and if you enjoy their relationship and you yourself happen to be in a crummy one, once in a while, as the abuse continues in your own relationship, your memory stretches back and says, why can't I have a sort of a man that my mom has, like my father? That is a superego. You model yourself after those things that you perceive to be beautiful, to be embodiments of perfection. Why do we talk of Gilgamesh, of the Buddha, of Jesus, of Mahatma Gandhi? Because they are the superegos of the human race. They make us feel bad for the animals that we are. If you have ever written a really, really good essay and you've inspired yourself, or you've written poetry, or you fell in love and this part of you came out, where you sat by the phone for 5 hours and then this person calls you. They were supposed to call you at 6, it's 11. You're enraged, but you hear their voice and something about you softens. Love makes you more than human. And that experience is just burned inside you. Time passes. You're in a different relationship. And you say to yourself, I want to love this person the way I loved that person 20 years ago. Why do I shortchange myself? Let me dump his ass and move on. That's the superego. And the tragedy is every time you and I have an experience that overwhelms us, beautifies us, not only does it transform you it also contaminates you. It reminds you that sometimes you're shortchanging yourself. If you've ever had a meaningful conversation that you really, really enjoyed, and then 10 minutes later, it devolved into gossip and just chit-chat, you say, really? I was just talking to Jesus Christ. Now I'm talking to Little Wayne. Freud had argued that he's like Da Vinci or Michelangelo or someone, that his ideas are like Michelangelo's painting, lots of darkness and little light. We suffer from three areas in life. There is no kingdom of God within us. There is no Buddha seed within us. None of us are made in the image of God. We are a mystery. Every single one of us in this room have a middle name. It's called X. We don't know what it is. We keep reading books about it. We keep listening to all these teachers on YouTube. We go to workshops to figure out who the hell we are. We can never discover ourselves. We are a mystery. We are a bundle of conflicting emotions and feelings and thoughts. We live in society. People we don't like. People we don't want to like. People we don't want to be around. Things we don't want to do. But if you want to stay in society, you're obligated to behave a certain way. Look, you're in this class. Some of you may not like me, and I don't blame you. Some of you may have had an exhausting day and you want to go home and maybe drink a beer and watch some porn. I don't blame you. But if you want a stupid grade, you are held hostage by a system that's far bigger than you are. That system will crush you until the time you die, and you have no power to overcome it. Society, not only does it benefit you and I in some ways, it also harms us. You're forced to do things you don't want to do. You're forced to become certain ways that you don't want to become. Why do we stay in relationships? Habit, addictions. You and I know full well, that all things outlive their usefulness. There are shirts I don't wear, jackets I don't wear, shoes I don't wear. People I don't talk to, I still have their fucking number. Why? Because life is nothing but a force of imposition, and there is no escape from it.